Typically, when we think of playing an old-school 2D Sonic the Hedgehog game, we think of the Genesis ones, and some people occasionally remember about the Game Gear Sonic the Hedgehog games. But did you also know that there is Sonic the Hedgehog for the Master System? Younger gamers might not remember the Master System, but this was Sega's answer to the 8-bit Nintendo. And this is a late release for it in 1991. The system was released in '86. And if you remember, Sonic the Hedgehog on the Genesis came out in '91, so this must have been in development around the same time, and it deviates a lot from the Genesis counterpart. But which one is better, the Game Gear version or the Sega Master System one? Well, let's find out. I bet you didn't know that Sega fanfare, Sega, goes back to the 80s. Or maybe you did know that if you're a Sega fan. Anyway, both the 8-bit versions of this game start on the familiar Green Hill Zone. But as we'll see, although some of the stages take inspiration from the Genesis Sonic the Hedgehog game, none of them are exactly the same, and there are a lot of new surprises in these 8-bit versions. In fact, half the stages are completely new themes, with only 3 of them, Scrap Brain Zone, Green Hill Zone, and Labyrinth Zone, carried over from the Genesis original. Both this and the Genesis one are 1991, so I'm assuming that the 8-bit Sonic the Hedgehogs were in development in parallel with the 16-bit one. And here we go into the second act of Green Hill Zone, which is where things really start diverging. And it doesn't just diverge from the Genesis Sonic the Hedgehog, it's also a little bit different from the Game Gear edition. I've pulled up the Game Gear one in the same part of the level so we can compare them side by side. Watch closely. The changes here are minute, but these little changes are scattered throughout the game, and later on there are some more significant alterations as well. The 8-bit Sonics in general have a lot of neat elements not found in the 16-bit Sonic the Hedgehogs, and vice versa, of course. While the 16-bit Sonics are more about going fast, the 8-bit ones are a lot of careful platforming, a lot of deliberate movements. So if the emphasis on speed over more traditional platforming maybe turned you off from the series, you might want to give the 8-bit ones a try, and see if you like those a little bit more. And can we take a second to appreciate the beautiful graphics in this level? The Master System has a pretty limited color palette, even compared to the Game Gear, and look at the purples and yellows they chose to draw the mountain range in the distance. It looks really striking against the vivid green of the forest. And the way they chose to have the clouds peeking out of the misty atmosphere, it's all just really beautiful. So all the bosses are fairly different on the Game Gear. Here's an example. Look at the bridge boss here, where before I had solid ground to jump on, now I have to jump on the middle of the post, otherwise when I duck to avoid the shots, I roll into a ball. And you might have seen some collision weirdness there. Yes, Sonic the Hedgehog on the 8-bit platforms has worse collisions and physics than the 16-bit versions, unfortunately. It really mars the game, which is otherwise quite excellent. But, you know, that's a sporadic nuisance. It's not a game-ruining bug or anything like that. The music is also quite good in these versions, and it's done by Yuzo Koshiro, the guy who did the Streets of Rage music. But, you know, stylistically, it seems a bit wrong for a Sonic game. This is kind of generic platformer music. It's very happy, you can kind of sing along to it, but it hasn't got that funk that the 16-bit Sonics had. If you've played Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Game Gear or Master System, you'll notice the music's a lot more New Jack Swing, the way it should be. Now here's a level that I think is actually rather cheap, that they did fix up a bit on the Game Gear version. If you've played Contra, you'll know what I mean. You can actually die from falling off the screen, even if you've scrolled just barely past a platform that you would have otherwise landed on. And that was a constant source of frustration for me when I played this level. And I don't know if they fixed it in the Game Gear one because it was out of necessity because the screen is so much smaller that you had to be able to scroll back down, or whether they realized it was really unfair and annoying. You'll see exactly what I mean in a second. By contrast, here's the Game Gear version of the same level. Notice how it scrolls back down a little bit to let you backtrack. That's really important, I think. And you know, some people maybe like the challenge of the level that scrolls upwards that you can't fall off the bottom of, but you know, I found it to be very unexpected, you know, when I die that way. Now here's something that's probably on your mind. How about the bonus stages and the Chaos Emeralds? Well, in these 8-bit versions, all you gotta do to get to the bonus stage is have over 50 rings when you beat the level. You don't have to jump through a ring or anything like that. Both 8-bit versions of the game have the same theme when it comes to the bonus stages, but the level layouts are completely different. And you can see the Game Gear one gives you twice as much time. Now, the Chaos Emeralds, unlike the 16-bit Sonics, are not in the bonus stages. They are hidden in plain sight most of the time in the levels. The trick is how you get them. Without dying, of course. So yeah, no Chaos Emeralds in the bonus stages. I think that might make it a little bit harder in some ways, because in the original Sonics, if you missed a Chaos Emerald in one of the stages, you could keep going to bonus stages until it wraps around and you get that emerald again. Of course, in the original Sonics, getting to bonus stages reliably was easier said than done, so... I do have one more complaint about the 8-bit Sonics, and that is the water level, the labyrinth. And I wasn't a huge fan of it in the Genesis. I liked the cleverness of the level construction, but when you run, it feels really slow, and in the 8-bit ones, it feels really like molasses, not even water, so it can be a bit tedious. It might seem I'm complaining a lot about 8-bit Sonic, but truth be told, it's one of my favorite platformers of that generation. And I don't know if it might be because I played the Genesis one into the ground, but when I feel like playing Sonic the Hedgehog, this 8-bit version is the one I go to these days. And part of that might be that it's more challenging. You don't get to recover rings when you get hit, and on the bosses you get no rings. A friend of mine called this Sonic the Hedgehog hard mode, and that's pretty much what you get. Now, I played this game all the way through with a friend about a week ago, and the last few stages had our jaws on the floor. I mean, it's one of those games where the last few stages just keep ramping it up, and you can tell the game is hurtling towards this climax. And when the ending credits finally rolled, we wanted to go and immediately play it through again. So in case it's not clear, I really do recommend the 8-bit version of Sonic the Hedgehog. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more reviews.